Why are we wearing all of this?
Series is Breaking Bad. You have to be prepared.
You don't think this is a little bit too much?
This is Crosspoint. You got to be prepared for anything.
He's crazy. Hi, I'm Devin Forsyth. This is my husband, Daniel. And we are here to welcome you to Crosspoint Community Church, where our mission is to lead people to be passionate followers of Christ.
What's up?
What is that?
It's just rock candy.
Oh.
I wouldn't bring the real stuff to church.
We also want to welcome any first-time guests this morning, and we'd like to have you go out to the welcome table on your way out this morning to get a little bit more information about you, and we also have a really cool free gift for you. No.
Might find this in the bag.
It's not that. It's something different. It's better than that. It is. We also want to remind you about Group Link, which is next Saturday after the evening service, and this is where you can get connected to be involved with a small group. And if you have any questions or need to know any more information about that, you can see a connector out in the lobby on your way out today.
Oh, and don't forget, today at 12:30 to 1:45, we're giving tours of the new building out on Kenton Station Road. It's the old flea market, so it's closed. Don't go over there trying to buy stuff, because people still are. And like I said, today we're starting the Breaking Bad series. Pastor Kevin Jack's going to give it, wherever he is. Anything else?
What's it about?
Addiction.
Yeah, put that away.
All right, we're going to go cook.
It's long music. Hey, I want to tell you two stories to start off today. I want to tell you the story of Angie Bachman and the story of Ben Carter. So Angie Bachman's story goes like this. She was a stay-at-home mom. She had 3 kids. Her husband had a very good job that paid well. At this point in time in her life, it's 1994, and her 3 kids, 2 of them are in elementary school and 1 of them's in middle school. So she's really at about the first point in her life where she is home throughout the day by herself. And she said it was just unbelievably difficult to stay at home between that 9 to 4 o'clock time period. She said her goal every day was to try to do enough things not to make herself crazy or stare at the clock every 5 minutes wondering how quickly the time has passed. So one Friday in 1994, she made a deal with herself. She said, if I can make it until noon, without staring at the clock and getting a few things done, I'm gonna reward myself. I'm gonna go do something. I'm gonna get out of the house and do something fun. So this is about 9 o'clock. She spent the next couple hours, did some cleaning, got some other stuff done. 12 o'clock came, and so she went upstairs, put on a dress, did her hair, did her makeup, and just kind of went out and seeing what she could possibly encounter and what she could do. And one of the first places that she saw along the way was a local casino. So she went into the casino, had a nice lunch, looked at her clock. It was only about 1 o'clock. Kids wouldn't get home until about 3:30. So she said, well, I'm going to go over to the blackjack table and see how that goes. So she took $20, went over to the blackjack table. It actually lasted her about half an hour or so. She lost it, thought that was a lot of fun, and went home. So she spent the next week, kind of went through the routine, did the same thing. Friday came around again. She said, you know what, if I can do this again, I've had a really good week. I'm going to go back there again. And so she went on that habit for a couple years, that she would go once a week. It was kind of her personal reward to herself for getting through the day. She set some rules for herself along the way of certain things, plays she would make, plays she wouldn't make, amount of money she would be willing to put down on the table, things that she wouldn't be willing to put down on the table, things like that. And she had these clear rules for herself that she thought really guarded her and kept her safe. By the year 2000, she was going to the casino every single day. She would spend 9 to 12 at home and then would go over there for lunch and then play the blackjack table for a couple of hours. The casino, actually, she was one of their best customers, and so they began sending her all these coupons and free deals and things like that, which for her only gave her more incentive to go back. By 2001, she had amassed over $20,000 in gambling debt. Up until this point in time, she'd kept all that information hidden from her family and hidden from her husband. But when the amount reached $20,000, she just couldn't hide it anymore. So she finally confessed to her husband what she had done. Her husband quickly cut up her credit cards, and they declared bankruptcy as a family, and she swore off gambling in casinos for the rest of her life and swore that she would never go back, which she was very successful in for the next couple of years. But 3 years later, her mother passed away. 2 months after that, her father passed away. She found out that she received over $1 million from their inheritance. And the first thing that came into her head was, I don't want to take any risk that that money is going to go back to the casino. And so she bought her family a really nice house in a state where gambling was illegal and thought they would be perfectly fine there. Until a couple months later, when they were driving through their hometown, she said the thought just hit her, just this dread of, if something goes wrong, if I have a question, I can't call my parents. Just this overwhelming sense of helplessness. And she said when that thought came into her head, the first desire that she had was, let's go to the casino. So her and her husband went. She was just there for a couple hours, thought it was not a big deal, and went out and was fine. The problem is that now that she had gotten a taste of it again, she now had this massive inheritance which she could use to satisfy her gambling addiction. A year later, over a 12-hour span while she was gambling, while her husband was on a business trip, over a 12-hour period, she lost $250,000. Just a year after that, her gambling debts had risen to $125,000. That's the story of Angie Bachman. I want to tell you the story of Ben Carter. Ben Carter had been seeing a therapist. He's in his mid-20s because in his past he struggled with alcohol addiction and severe depression. When his therapist makes a recommendation to him, he said, well, have you ever tried exercising? A lot of clients who see me, they try exercising as a way to really help them out and get away from these other things. So he thought, I'll give it a shot. So he went to the gym, got a local membership, went to the gym for about an hour, and kind of enjoyed it. And so he started going a couple days a week. As he started going a couple days a week, he began receiving all these compliments from friends and family of how good he looked, how much better how much more in shape he was over time. And he was noticing he was really, really starting to enjoy it. A couple years later, it had grown that now he was going to the gym 6 days a week for a couple hours every day. It was starting to interfere with his life. He wouldn't go on holidays. He wouldn't go visit his family over Thanksgiving and times like that because he was afraid that he would miss a workout and it would interfere with his schedule. His social life began deteriorating because he didn't have time for friends because he was so worried about they would cause him to eat unhealthy or he would miss a workout along the way. Now, the interesting thing is, as these things were happening, the only word that he received from his friends were compliments. And it was still, you look so great. I wish I had the discipline that you had to keep doing it. He said it just made him feel good about himself. He would post a thing online about how far he had ran, and all the comments would be how incredible it was and how much discipline he had. But the problem is that as he was doing this, even though he looked great, his body was incredibly unhealthy, and his personal life was destroyed. So much so to the point that when he visited his therapist one day, he begged his therapist to tell him to quit exercising, which his therapist finally did. And this is his comment at the end. And I'm sure this is your feeling as well every day when you wake up. He said, I still struggle with the urge to pick up a dumbbell or go for a run every day. Right? Is that your temptation as well? You're just like, oh. Now here's what we say, and this is what's fascinating to me, is we would say Angie has an addiction, right? And we would even go so far to say Angie needs to get help. But we compliment Ben on his discipline. And here's the fascinating thing, is we would say Angie needs help, but Ben had to go to professional help and beg them to tell him to stop. When the reality is that they're both addicted, they both have a problem, and they both need help. You see, here's what happens, and this is what's so interesting. There are about 4 addictions in our society which we actually view as addictions: drugs, alcohol, pornography, and gambling. And if your addiction is not one of those 4, it's not a big deal. It's perfectly fine. I mean, sometimes people have addictions to the point, like in the exercise side, that we urge people on and we encourage them to feed the addiction in their life. And so this is what I want to do in this series. I want to talk about what are the addictions that we have that we're not clear about, that we don't understand, that maybe we may be complimented for. What are the addictions that are in our lives that in small ways could be ruining our lives? And then how do we get rid of them? What are the next steps that we can actually take to rid our lives of those addictions? Now this is why this matters. Before we get into the content for the series, anything like that, I want to tell you why this is important, because to me, it's important for 2 reasons. The first one is this. You'll hear people refer to themselves as having an addictive personality, when the reality is there is no such thing as an addictive personality. It's just not in existence. There are addicted personalities. And this is what that means. The more small addictions you have in your life, the greater likelihood you have to take on more addictions. That as your brain and as your body become wired to having addictions and being compelled to do different things, you're far likely to become addicted to more things. And so here's the issue, is your small addiction, which may not seem like a big deal, could very, very easily lead to larger, more damaging addictions in your life. And so for the things that, like, even if it's something like exercise, that we would say this is a good thing, if you're not aware of those addictions, they could quickly lead to far more damaging things. Now that hits everybody. The other one's a little different in terms of why this matters. And that is, if you're a follower of Christ, if you consider yourself a follower of Christ, if you're trying to be a follower of Christ, if you don't know where you're on in that journey, somewhere along the way, the reality is that every addiction you have hurts your freedom. Every single addiction that you have in some way lessens your freedom, which is why Jesus came. He came that you would be free to follow him. And so if there are addictions in our lives, even if they seem small and insignificant, they keep us from following Christ fully, which is something that we should be very, very serious about and something that we should care about a great deal. So with all that said, let's talk about what actually are addictions. Here's the definition of an addiction. Ingesting a substance or engaging in an activity that becomes compulsive and interferes with ordinary life. I think that key word there is compulsive, that I feel compelled to do something. The difference between an addiction and something that you just enjoy is desire becomes compulsion. And maybe that's the biggest thing that you can remember if you're looking to what is an addiction, what is it? It's not just that I have a desire to do it, it's that I feel compelled to do it along the way. I know this sounds silly and it's gonna be goofy, and unless if you've experienced this addiction, you're just gonna think I'm a moron. But I could probably strongly say that there was a point in my life that I was addicted to video games. And you're just like, you look at some of you, you're like, you're so dumb. That doesn't make any sense. And I would just like to say, well, you haven't tried playing video games enough. Come to the dark side. Then you'll understand the real power. Yes, there we go. I'm getting an amen from the 2 boys up front. Thank you very much. But here's the deal: is like this is something that is entertaining, that is fun, that is a good thing. But I noticed that my brain's wiring was, if anything was going on, just I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that, and I find myself there for a long time. And I think what happens in our society is because we usually just view addiction as drugs, alcohol, pornography, and gambling, is that our world is full of socially acceptable addictions. That there are all these addictions that we have that we all understand we have, and they're just okay. We're all right with it. Let me go through a list of a couple different ones that we may have. And I just want you to know before I start with this list, this series is 3 weeks long, and these are going to be 3 weeks. Okay, there is no room for me to kind of lead you into this slowly, because when we're talking about the issue of addiction, like, it's always going to be personal. So let's talk about some of them. First one is food. Food. Are you eating to nourish your body and give yourself the energy that you need? Or are you medicating your mood with calories? You see, there's a big difference between those two. There's a huge difference. Is this me being healthy? Or is this, I feel bad, so I need this? See, the funny thing is that, I know doctors could tell you this, face people all the time who it's, change your lifestyle or it's not going to be good. Change your lifestyle or it's not going to be good. And the hard thing is most people go, I'm going to go for it's not going to be good. Has anyone seen the documentary Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead? It's really uplifting and encouraging. I mean, like, you just go out, you're like, oh, yeah. It's fascinating. It's about a guy who changes his diet entirely. He had all these medical problems, so he changes his diet entirely. And he's interviewing these people at a fast food restaurant as they're eating. And he's talking to this one guy, and he goes, well, you know that, like, if you keep eating like this and you keep going down this path, it'll kill you. And he goes, the last years are bad anyway. I'd rather eat this. And I was, oh, my gosh. So that's food. Next one is this, shopping. Shopping. Are you feeling need? Are you getting something that you need to have? Or even getting something that you want? Okay? I'm saying that on the good side. Getting something that you want. Or are you uplifting your emotions with the belief that if you have stuff, you'll have significance? There's a big difference there. Am I getting something I need, or even something that I want, or something that I just like? Or am I making myself feel better because I have the newest, the best, or the best deal? I think that's where a lot of people lie on the consumer addiction. It's not that I need new, or it's not that I need good. I feel good about myself if I get a good deal. I know I'm not licensed or anything like that in this, but I'll share the story. I don't think my older sister, Melanie, has a shopping addiction, but I would always tease her anytime we go out shopping together, and I'd be like, Melanie, what'd you get? And the first thing she would say is, I saved $80. I'm like, no, you didn't, because you didn't need anything that you got. You spent $120. Like, that's great that it's a great deal, but I saved $80. That's not it. Let me talk for another second on this. If you're in consumer debt, I don't mean mortgage, I don't mean school loans, anything like that. If you are like in credit card consumer debt and you keep buying stuff that you don't need, you have a problem. I mean, there's no other way about it. Because you can't possibly go, yes, this is a good, healthy decision for me. You know it's bad. You know it hurts. And so if you're there, there's a problem. Next one, work. There are two main purposes to work. That is to provide for our family and to accomplish something, to be a part of what you're doing. You believe in the mission that you're a part of. So it's either to provide for your family or because you love what you're doing and you care about it. So are you working for that, or are you working to prove your value through your achievements? See, there's a big difference there. Providing, accomplishing something, or I need to do this, or get to this level, or make this amount of money, or get to this position so that my friends and family will think I'm worth something. There's a big difference there. I think one of the clear signs on that you can understand is how do you feel when you take a day off? Now, I know for those of us who don't have a work addiction, we're going, great, like, feel wonderful. I would go for one right now because it's so forward. But for people who have that addiction to work, honestly, it gets like 4 o'clock and they start getting real antsy. and they don't know what to do with themselves. And like, I got to fix something. I got to put something away. I got to clean something. I got to at least read something or something like that because I can't handle not accomplishing something. It's fascinating to me. In the Bible, one of the 10 commands that God gives us is take a day off. Not a suggestion. Command. Rest for a day. And it's his way of guarding us against becoming addicted to accomplishments. One other thing that's really closely associated with that is the addiction to money. It's fascinating. Our money says, in God we trust, printed right on it. But isn't it true that so more often the money itself feels more trustworthy? I mean, it says in God we trust. But if we don't have it, then we don't feel okay. I could go on for a while. Another big one is power, the need to be in control. Now, this is what no one ever says, I need to be in control. This is what we say. We say, I just feel like I could do it better, right? There you go. I'm not okay because I'm not in charge and I'm not telling people what to do. It's just a matter of like a side comment to a friend. I just feel like I can do it a lot better than they're doing it. That's why I'm so frustrated. That's an addiction to power. I trust you that you can identify some of these areas in your life. I mean, honestly, I'm not even going to touch media. I'm not going to touch social media. I can just say it like this. If Facebook or Twitter is the last thing you look at night and the first thing you look at in the morning, you may have a problem. Like, you're getting your social media fix right here. That's what's happening. So there may be issues there. Now, here's the deal. Is that I care about this far more than just the issue of addiction. Because the Bible speaks to this all the time, but it calls it something different. The Bible refers to it as idolatry. And this is how the Bible defines idolatry. Worship, attachment, or devotion to something other than God. And that key word that sticks out to me is attachment. So if addiction is I feel compelled to do something, idolatry says it the same way. It says I am attached to this and I'm not okay if I don't have this. Now, the truth is that we can have idols of things that seem good, but as soon as they become idols, they hurt our ability to follow God. Like, I'll share a noble one of my idols. I'm not going to share the petty ones because I don't want you to judge me. So, there you go. I'm going to share the ones that you go, oh, that's okay. That's all right, Kevin, because it makes me feel better about myself if I do that. As I was prepping for the content in the series and stuff like that, honestly, one of my idols is my family. And I've had this thought before of Bethany is driving out with the girls by themselves, and I've thought if something happens to them, I don't know what I'd do. I don't know where that would leave me. I don't know what I would do next. I have no idea. Now, this is what people say. That's okay. That's your family. But it's still an idol. And it's still an issue. And I mean, if my family is my idol, then I'm not actually really loving them. Because I'm attached to them. And I can't do what's best for them. I think... I'm going down a path that I didn't have to go down, but if I could just say it like this, I think this is one of the main sources of parents doing a poor job parenting their children is their children are their idols. And so what happens is we don't make decisions that are best for our children because we're so focused on their success. We don't tell them no, or we don't tell them yes in certain areas that we should, because we're attached to them. One of the best things that I ever heard is, whenever you cheer for your child at a ball game, are you cheering for their first name or their last name? I think that's huge. See, this is a big deal. This is a big deal because in our culture, addictions are everywhere, which means in the same vein, idols are everywhere. And we can't be free to live how we should, and we can't be free to follow God unless if we're actually going to be committed to getting rid of these in our lives. I want to show you an example in the Bible of someone who does exactly this. If you have your Bible, open it up to Romans chapter 7. Romans chapter 7 is where we're going to be. And this passage that we're going to look at, I just want you to know, it is infuriating to read. Like, it is confusing. He is all over the place. He's got a reason for it, and I'll give you that in a second. So this is what he says. He says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. Doesn't it kind of sound like a Dr. Seuss book? Like a little bit? I do not want to do what I want to do, but I do what I don't do. Sam I am. There we go. He just goes through it. If you get confused, this is what he's going to do, just so you understand. Paul, this is the Apostle Paul writing, and he is so frustrated with his own sin that he writes, it's a literary technique, he writes in an infuriating way. So what he does, in how he writes, he helps us feel his frustration and his emotion, okay? So if you're sitting out there and you're going, that's what he wants you to feel. If you get lost, confused along the way, it all comes down to that first line. He's got another summary statement in a minute. He says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. So very simply, he says, my brain tells me this is how I want to act, and this is how I should not act. And this is what I continually find. Even though my brain tells me, do this, not this, I continually act on these things, and I don't do these things. Can we agree? Are we there? Absolutely. I never tell myself at the start of a week, you know what I really need to do this week? I need to rack up the hours on Netflix. That's what I need. You know what I need to do? I need to, when I get home from work, I need to ignore my family, not play with my girls, get on the phone, or watch SportsCenter for an hour. That's what, that would make my life healthy. I never once tell myself that. But do I do it? Yeah, absolutely I do. Because I am stuck in the same boat as Paul. Now let's read on with this. And remember, he stays with the same line of thought, but I just want you to hear his language because I think it's great. I know that nothing good lives in me. That is, in my sinful nature. So he's saying right here, I have within me a sinful nature, which we've talked about so many times. No one ever has to teach a kid to steal, lie, and cheat. They do it naturally. You don't ever have to instruct them. Hey, honey, you're about 2. I want you to start lying to me now. That'd be a good thing. That's when people start lying. No, they're just going to do it. They're good. Because kids have a sinful nature, like we all have a sinful nature. And he's saying that within me is a sinful nature. He says, for I have the desire in my head to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For what I do is not the good I want to do. No, the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. And then he makes another summary statement here. Now, if I do not want to do, I hate this. This is so hard. I mean, if I could just come up here and read Fox and Socks, I would be quickly fine. Anyone Fox and Socks fan? First I'll make a quick trick brick stack, then I'll make a quick trick block stack. You can make a quick trick chick stack. You can make a quick trick clock stack. Maybe not fans of Fox. Thank you very much. All right, let's try it again. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So this is fascinating what he says right here. I love this. He says, so if I say right here that I want to do these things and I don't want to do these things, and I continually find myself acting in the other way, that I act on these things and not on these things, he says, this is great, it's not me, it's my sin that is living in me. And when I read that and understand that, I think, if only I would have known that when I was 8. I would have gotten out of so much trouble as a kid. My mom would be like, who broke the window? I'd be like, it's not me. She's like, I saw you do it. No, Mom. I want to do these things, not these things. But it is the sin living in me that compels me to break the window. I'm not at fault here. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we all knew that? And my mom would be like, he needs help. He needs to see somebody. There is a problem here. And so what Paul is saying right here in this moment that's amazing is he is saying, I am addicted to sin. He says, because I don't want to sin, but I keep sinning. And so the only conclusion that I can come to is that even though in my head, in my heart, I say I want to do these things, the only conclusion I can come to is that I am addicted to sin. And here was my biggest fear with doing the series, is we talk about this idea of addiction, and we talk about the addictions that we all have, and that people would just kind of go, not me. Or even maybe more aggressive, who are you to say that I have an addiction? But let's just pause here for a moment. If the Apostle Paul, who planted churches all around the world, risked his life over and over and over again for the message of the gospel and was eventually martyred for his faith, if the Apostle Paul says, I am addicted, I think we could admit that as well. Agreed? If the Apostle Paul is willing to confess, I have an addiction to sin, I think in the 21st century we could say, me too. Now let's finish out the passage, as infuriating as it is. So I find this law at work. When I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within my members. He says two different things there that are fascinating. He says there are two laws at work. He says there is God's law that tells me what's right, and then there is the law of sin. And he said that within my body, these things are just combating against each other. He said, I've got to figure out how I can get God's law to rule and get rid of the law of sin. Which we'll get to that in just a little bit. That's where we're going to spend most of the next week, but we'll finish out those last two verses in just a second. I want to ask you first, I want to take you through a couple questions and ask you what your idols are, what your addictions are. I'm not going to talk the whole time through this. I want to leave a couple moments of silence so you can have a few seconds to think and to inspect yourself and to pray and to do whatever you need to do. But I want to give you three questions, because if we're actually going to get rid of our addictions and get rid of our idols, we've got to be at least somewhat aware of what they are. So let's start. First question. What, if taken away, would ruin me? What, if taken away, would ruin me? And I don't even necessarily mean like for good. Ruin you for good. I mean just ruin you in the moment. Our 3-year-old Maddie is addicted to the phone. And she wakes up in the morning and says, can I have your phone? Can I have your phone? It's like, no. Okay, could I have your phone? No. But could I have your phone? I feel like there's a miscommunication here. Something's not working. But so anyway, and she's on the phone, she's playing, and we say, you need to stop, and she throws a fit, and she cries. And that's what kids do. But as adults, we have similar responses at times, right? Like, I mean, I don't expect you when something goes wrong or something's taken away from you that you throw yourself on the floor and start crying and kicking your legs and beating your fists on the ground. But we emotionally have similar reactions. Why would that be taken from me? Why would they do that? So what if taken away would ruin you? Even if it's just for a moment. Second question. Where do I find myself struggling to stop something I know is damaging? Where do I find myself struggling to stop something I know is damaging? Like, let me give you a goofy version of this first. I do not have an addiction to pot roast because I hate it. My wife loves pot roast. She puts it down on the table, and I know some of you, you're looking at me, you're like, you fool. Pot roast is great. And I'm like, it does nothing. But like, she puts it down on the table, and I'm not taking the second helping. Like, I'm not stirring up, and I'm not leaving the table like, oh my, and then fall asleep for 30 minutes because I ate too much. That's what I mean, because I don't have an addiction. I do have addictions in other areas that I'm not going to reveal all of them here. But I do have areas that I go, man, I got to cut that out. I got to stop that. But then I keep doing it. Right? And we're going to get into this in the later weeks. I just want to share this at first. This is the really tricky thing with addictions. Because if you try to stop and you fail, what happens is you only reinforce the addiction. It just comes back stronger, which is scary. But what have you tried to stop or want to stop and find yourself that you have it? And this is what we do. This is what we tell ourselves. Is when we try to stop something and it doesn't work, we go, it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, I see them and I see them and they have the same struggles. So it's really not that big of a deal. Third question. What do I feel like I need to hide? What do I feel like I need to hide? It may be something really serious, or it may not be a big deal at all. This is how I knew early in our marriage that I probably had a video game addiction. We had no kids. Like, it's just funny. Like, parents, can you remember back to the day of no kids? And I love my children, but sometimes I go, why did I do this? Like, Saturdays were awesome. And but like we'd have Saturday would come and like we had nothing we had to do. That was it. We had nothing we had to do. And so we get in there and like sometimes, some Saturdays, I would go down in the basement and I would spend like 8 hours playing video games. Which again, if you don't have a video game addiction, never have, you're like, how could you do that? Those of us who have been there were like 8 hours, like lightweight. That's nothing. But this is how I knew it. Like, I'd come up for food. Don't worry, I'd come up for food and stuff like that. But then I'd go right back down. And Bethany would, like, tell her friends. She'd be like, oh, yeah, Kevin played video games for 8 hours. I'd be like, why would you say that? Because you did. Like, yeah, but you don't have to tell them. You don't have to share that. It's like, it's so silly, and it's so little. But I didn't want other people knowing that. And so what are the things that I do that I want to hide, that I don't want talked about, that I just want to keep to myself? What do I feel like I need to hide? Now here's the thing, is that if we purely talk about this in terms of addictions, the way you defeat an addiction is a combination of a couple things. It's medication, it's a self-help group, and it's therapy. And that's how you get rid of addictions. If we switch the conversation, and we need to switch the conversation to the issue of idols, how you defeat an idol is very, very different. Now, I'm not saying anything against medication, self-help groups, or therapy, okay? I'm not talking against those. But I'm saying that if we actually, however we define it, if we actually want to get rid of them, we need to look at this in terms of the idol term, because how you defeat them is so different. I want to show you what Paul says. This is how he finishes out that section. He says this, "What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death?" I think that phrase, and it just stuck out to me last night when I was going through it, that phrase is amazing. That he is actually willing to come to that conclusion. This body, the way that it is acting, the things that it's doing, it is going to kill me. Not just that he's going to die, but he's saying this sinful nature that lives within me, it's going to be the death of me. And I know people like have body image struggles, like when they look in the mirror and stuff like that. I don't think any of us are like, body of death. Like, that's what I see. Unless if you're like a professional wrestler and that's your name, which would be awesome. Like, and now it comes out, the body of death. Like, that would be cool. But Paul's there, he's like, when I see myself and I see how I act, I feel like the things that I'm doing and my urges that I can't control, they're going to kill me. And so this is his plea. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. Do you see it? Because it's fascinating. What I have within me is going to kill me. I need Jesus. You see, the solution to idolatry and also the solution to addictions, the only way to defeat them is God's grace. Which, that's where we're going to spend the whole week next week. And I'll give you details, I'll give you information, and I'm going to show you just an absolutely mind-blowing story of someone who lived out God's grace. It absolutely blew me away. It's incredible. But I at least need to show you the path that we're going to head down and what that looks like. of what God's grace is. And this is where it starts. Maybe I'll just share with you, this is where you start. As you pray, God, bring me to my knees. Break me. Rip me apart. Do whatever you have to do to get my attention. I'll be honest with you. That's a terrifying prayer. It's a terrifying prayer. God, do whatever it is you have to do to get me where I need to be. I can promise you something. He'll do it. He absolutely will. He'll do it. But that's what you pray. Because the only way to actually live into this new reality that God is calling us to is to go through the fire to get rid of the impurities that are in our lives. You can't get rid of the impurities without going through the fire. And so you ask God. Now, if I'm really honest with you, He doesn't need your permission. He'll do it anyway. But you ask Him. You say, God, I want you. I know there are things in my life, even if they are completely socially acceptable and every single person around me struggles with the same things. There are things in my life that need to be destroyed so I can follow you. You see, there's this theme in the Bible of the wrath of God. And Paul even talks about it in Romans. And he talks about the wrath of God. If someone doesn't forgive you or you can't make amends, leave them to the wrath of God. And whenever we talk about the wrath of God, I think we always think like fire and lightning from heaven. He's going to destroy them and kill everybody. Like, right? Like when I say wrath of God, it sounds like, boo, doomsday. Here we go. The wrath of God is this. The wrath of God is if there is sin and struggles in your life, it's Him taking you through the necessary destruction, the necessary trials, so that you can follow Him. And that's loving. You see, the most unloving thing that God could actually do is if there is sin in your life to leave you on your own. Like, doesn't that make sense? If there are struggles in your life, the worst thing God could possibly do for you is just go, well, I'll just let them go. I'll just let them go through it. It's like I look at that as a parent. If there are issues, if there are struggles in my kid's life, the most loving thing I could do is to correct them. And the funny thing is that when it comes to God, when we get that correction through trials or difficulties, we usually look up at Him in prayer and go, what are you doing? It's like, I'm doing the most loving thing I can do. But your prayer starts with this. God, bring me to my knees. If that's what it takes. Rip everything apart. Destroy me. If that's what it takes. So that I can follow you. Let me pray for you. Father, as we gather here today, and as our Father, I believe as our hearts and our minds are tentative, as we're nervous, as we're maybe a little scared. Father, I just ask that you give us the courage and boldness to seek you through whatever we need to do, through whatever you need to take us through. That as we go through difficulties and trials and struggles along the way, that we would know that you are with us every step of the way. But Lord, I ask this most right now. Give us the courage to face the addictions that are in our lives. Because everything within our sinful nature is going to want to tell ourselves it's not a big deal, it doesn't really matter, and lots of other people have the same problem. But Father, let us not listen to that voice. Let us listen to your voice, which says, I died so you would have freedom. And I want you to follow me. And so, Father, that's my prayer, that over this Sunday and over the next couple weeks, that we would learn and we would desire to follow you a little closer and and a little stronger than we had before. And I pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus.